What's going on, guys? AxelBeats here for Anime Uproar, and today we're going to be covering some of the most powerful characters in One Piece. These being the 19 users of Conqueror's Haki. These characters are one in several million cases of people born with qualities of kings, supreme rulers who are able to exert their wills on other people. But before we get into that video, you guys know the drill. If you're enjoying the One Piece content on the channel, remember to leave a like and a comment down below. And of course, if you haven't taken the time to subscribe to the channel, that is the best way to support us and keep up to date with our content. Not to mention, it's absolutely free, so it's a win-win. Finally, this video will probably cover some manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. Before we get into the actual characters who have Conqueror's Haki, we should probably talk about what Conqueror's Haki is, especially since it can often feel like Conqueror's is the most ambiguous kind of all Haki. Like with observation and armament, there tends to be a very clear thing happening, boosting the user's ability to perceive the world around it, or bolstering the attack and defense of the people using it or their weapons. But what does it really mean to impose your will on others? At a base level, this just means that your willpower or your desire to see your dream come true is stronger in comparison to the will of your target. And the bigger that gap, the stronger the effect of your Conqueror's Haki will be. Which is why we often see this ability taking shape in those who have roles of leadership or who have deep-seated dreams that they're trying to make a reality. It is those who aim to change the world who have the strongest wills, and that's what makes them natural leaders. And that tends to be a common thread between Conqueror's users. They have the ability to lead, dominate, or guide those around them. In terms of how this ability actually manifests, it's fairly unique. Unlike observation and armament, this is an ability that you have to be born with, and it's unable to be taught or trained. The only way to actually develop Conqueror's Haki is to generally become stronger both in body and in spirit. This means that the more capable someone is, the more they're able to conquer, and that kind of makes sense. This also means that while children can manifest Conqueror's Haki like Ace did, it's usually pretty mild in their hands and doesn't fully take shape until they're adults. Once it does develop though, it tends to be used in 4 different ways. These are Domination, Incapacitation, Pressure, and Infusion. At least those are the titles given to them in the One Piece wiki, and honestly, they're pretty fitting. I don't believe I've heard these names used in the actual series, but we're gonna go with them for ease of access. Domination is the ability to intimidate or subdue others. We typically see this being used against animals, and it is the first example of Haki that we saw in the series, with Shanks scaring off the King of the Coast. It's more about scaring or stopping things that you don't really want to hurt. For example, Luffy uses this against Motobaro or Tsurume, as they're just animals and they don't really deserve to be beaten up. But even so, their rampages do need to be stopped. That said, we do also see this being used against non-animals as well. For example, when Luffy is fighting the Gorgon sisters, he uses it to stop them from destroying the statues of his new friends on Amazon Lily. What's interesting is that both of these two obviously have zone fruits, so while they themselves are not animals, they are influenced by animal traits. At least, that's what Lucci had explained when he was talking about how his fruit affects him. Incapacitation is the next level up. We aren't just trying to stop an animal rampaging, and we don't particularly care about the people that we're targeting. So instead of just scaring them, we're knocking them out. This is first seen when Shanks walks onto Whitebeard's ship, and like half of his crew passes out as a result. When this is used by Luffy, he's typically surrounded by a large group of enemies, and thus this will thin their numbers pretty considerably. A Conqueror doesn't just impose himself on the living things around him though, it can also damage the surrounding environment as well, and this is pressure. We also see this when Shanks gets onto the Moby Dick, as he not only knocks out Whitebeard's crew, but you can also see damage to the ship as well. More noticeably though is when 2 Conqueror users clash and the pressure begins to spark, sending out black lightning, and also producing shockwaves that can push back whatever's around them. If the users are particularly powerful, these shockwaves can even divide the clouds above them in the sky. And finally, the newest form of Conqueror's Haki that we know of being Infusion. By imbuing their weapons and bodies with Haki, they can boost their attacks in a more impactful way. I know this isn't exactly right, but I like to think of it as a kind of fusion of armament and Conquerors. This is actually significant enough of a boost to allow Luffy to even make meaningful hits on Kaido, when only armament alone wasn't leaving any damage. This is one of the most rare elements of Conquerors. Even among the only 19 users that we know of, just 7 of them are able to use Infusion, at least that we've seen so far. These being Roger, Whitebeard, Kaido, Luffy, Big Mom, Yamato, and Zorro. Now, speaking of, let's talk about all the known users of Conquerors, and to keep them a little bit organized, we're going to be dividing them into 4 groups. Firstly, the legends. People who have challenged the world and came back as champions, mostly of the previous era of pirates. These include Gold D. Roger, Edward Newgate, Kozuki Odin, Don Qinzhao, Silvers Rayleigh, Kaido, and Big Mom. We can also probably throw Sengoku into the mix, and on that note, it's pretty interesting to mention that he's the only Marine to ever have shown Conqueror's Haki in the series. I'm not sure why it's so slanted towards pirates, but if I had to guess, it might be something in line with about how Marines are part of a chain of command, and unless you're at the top, you're not really conquering or controlling anything. Moving on, we have a few characters who are in their prime right now, who aren't quite in the old guard, but aren't quite in the new guard either. These being Shanks, Doflamingo, and Katakuri. And from here we can move on to the next generation of conquerors, including Monkey D. Luffy, Roronoa Zorro, Yamato, Portgas D. Ace, Eustace Kid, and Boa Hancock. Finally, there are 2 non-canon users in Douglas Bullet and Niguri. I highly doubt that these are the only characters who have conquerors in the series, and likely there are a few characters that we've already met that we just don't know about. If I had to guess, I'd probably look at characters like Dragon, Zebek, Blackbeard, Sakazuki, Imusama, and Joy Boy, all likely being Conqueror's users as well. Of course, we also have characters to mention like Garp and Mihawk, but to me those 2 don't quite give off the Conqueror's vibe, if that makes sense. Both of them are just kind of too content with where they are, and aren't exactly ambitiously working towards a goal. They just don't show off that drive or ambition to grow, or to spread their influence that's often associated with conquerors. Law as well kind of fits in this boat, as he is definitely ambitious, but he doesn't really feel like he's confident enough to give off that I can do anything mentality, especially when you compare him to characters like Luffy or Kid, for example. He instead prefers to strategize or lean on others like Luffy to make his goals a reality. And at this point, you might be asking, well, what about characters like Zorro or Yamato who have conquerors but aren't the leaders of their crew? And to that, we have to point out that they directly rank under other people who do have conquerors. In fact, every case of a Conqueror's user who isn't the head honcho is directly subservient to someone who also has Conquerors. Sort of a kings only respect kings mentality, I guess. As Marigold and Treble both explained throughout the series, these characters have qualities of kings. It isn't about them literally being royals or nobles, the bloodline just doesn't matter. But instead, it's all about ambition. That said, by the time that many of these people's lives or adventures ended, they would also gain some kind of title or epithet that would be a symbol of their conquering roles. So let's talk about what these conquerors did and how they earned their titles. Gold D. Roger was the captain of the first crew since the Void Century to successfully make it all the way to the end of the Grand Line, finding Laugh-Tale and earning the title of Pirate King. His rival, Edward Newgate, became a Yonko who held influence over a ton of islands and nations by leading a pirate crew of over 1,600 members. And it wasn't just his crew, though. Newgate himself was also given the titles of Strongest Man in the World and the man closest to finding the One Piece, even holding those titles despite how unhealthy he had become in his old age. The true show of Newgate's dominance, though, is his ability to make the entire world call him Whitebeard, even though he only had a mustache. Speaking of insanely powerful people, Kozuki Odin, the man who would conquer the region of Kuri, which had previously been filled with exiled outlaws, pillagers, and murderers. Just all around not a fun place. Some of these outlaws include people like Kinemon, Raizo, Kanjuro, Kikunojo, Kawamatsu, Denjiro, and Ashura Doji. And those names matter quite a bit considering that they made up the majority of the people who would form Odin's Red Scabbards when he became daimyo. Interestingly enough, though, the only title that Odin would actually be given is Idiot Lord by Orochi. However, in general, just his name alone has become synonymous with legend, so it's a pretty unique situation for sure. We all know how badass Odin is, but on the complete opposite side of the spectrum, we have Qinzhao. Let me know in the comments if anyone actually likes Qinzhao, because to me, he's just always seemed so lame. Either way though, Qinzhao was the 12th leader of the Happo Navy. They had collected a massive hoard of gold under the jeweled ice sheet, which was only accessible due to Qinzhao's drill-shaped head. This head was flattened by Monkey D. Garp and later ultimately fixed by Luffy. For his position as head of the Qinzhao family and of the Happo Navy, he was given the title of Don Qinzhao. As well, for his signature attack, he was given the title Qinzhao the Drill. Rayleigh is pretty interesting, as we don't know a ton of things about him, let alone the specifics of what he really wanted in his youth, other than to help Roger on his voyage. What we do know is that he was the first mate to the King of the Pirates, and given the title Dark King. And to me at least, this implies that while Roger was getting all of the attention and living in the light of public view, Rayleigh was likely in charge of a lot of the background things, helping from the shadows. That's just my theory though, since I can't really see this generally friendly guy like Rayleigh having this ominous sounding epithet for no reason. Kaido, on the other hand, could definitely earn a name like that. He was the captain of the Beast Pirates and now a former Yonko, ruling over Wano for the last 20 years and amassing an army of artificial devil fruit users, as well as powerful ancient Zoans. Kaido himself was considered to be so powerful that in any one-on-one fight, he would always come out on top, because he is more or less unkillable, earning him the title of strongest creature in the world. His former crewmate, as well as fellow former Yonko herself, Charlotte Linlin, ruled over the Totland archipelago, as well as being a prominent pirate for the last 60 years. Much like Kaido, Linlin would go on to produce her own personal army, although she did it in a more literal sense, aiming to have children from each race other than giants, and to form a pseudo-peaceful utopia where all races could belong. She would go on to have 85 children with 43 husbands over the last 42 years, and as such, it makes a lot of sense that she would be called Big Mom. And our last entry into the new guard, we have Sengoku, the former fleet admiral of the Marines, who was considered to be one of the strongest Marines from Roger's generation, going on to lead the Marines until their victory at Marineford against the Whitebeard pirates. His strategic mind earned him the title of the resourceful general, but he also had a much more straightforward name, the Buddha, which instead was a reference to the devil fruit that he used. In either vein, he's supposed to be a symbol of wisdom and guidance among the Marines. First of our current age of Yonkos is Shanks. Shanks is another character who is filled with mysteries, but it feels like we're on the verge of knowing his true intentions. However, it would seem that his overall goal is to stop Blackbeard. Shanks himself is of course a former apprentice on Roger's crew, as well as being the inspiration for Luffy to set sail. Unlike the former Yonko, Shanks doesn't have a title about his strength. In fact, none of this generation of Yonko do, which is pretty interesting. Instead, he's simply called Red-Haired Shanks. That said, much like how Odin's name demands respect, as soon as anyone hears red hair, they do jump to it being Shanks, and owning an entire hair color is pretty impressive in itself. Doflamingo, the only celestial dragon that we know of with Conqueror's Haki, led the Don Quixote pirates, ultimately earning a spot as a warlord and giving him carte blanche access to conquer Dressrosa and become its king for the last decade. All while he also ruled the underworld under the codename Joker, fitting for someone who would bring smiles to Wano. Finally, Dofi's epithet, the Heavenly Demon, or Heavenly Yasha, is in reference to him being a celestial dragon who now aims to destroy everything. And the last of our midpoint conquerors is, of course, Katakuri, the second son of Big Mom and one of her sweet commanders. He is considered to be the strongest member of her crew and rules over Komugi Island as its minister. We unfortunately don't know a lot about where Katakuri is going based on recent manga events, but I would imagine that he's likely going to get a title based on his actions from this point on. Finally, onto the new age of conquerors, starting of course with Monkey D. Luffy, captain of the Straw Hats and leader of the Grand Fleet of 5,000 members. The man aiming to be the next pirate king, the return of Joy Boy, and inheritor of both Roger's Will and the mythical Nika Devil Fruit. He is the former 5th Emperor and current new Yonko, and it's pretty straightforward to see why Luffy has Conqueror's Haki when you consider everything involved around his character at this point. But what is interesting to note is that Luffy is seemingly the only one on the list who has no interest in conquering others. Instead, he has this innate ability to garner the trust, respect, and loyalty of anyone whose path he crosses, and he simply wants to be the most free. Obviously, Luffy's title is Straw Hat, but that raises some interesting questions, like what he's going to be called once he gives the hat back to Shanks, and how that connects both of these two characters to the giant Straw Hat under Marijois. Luffy's first mate Zorro also has Conqueror's Haki. It's constantly a joke in the series that Zorro seems like he would be more capable of being captain because of the air that he carries himself with. And that makes a lot of sense considering that both of them are conquerors. Zoro's dream isn't to become king of the pirates, though, or even captain. Instead, he wants to become the world's greatest swordsman, so that his name can become famous enough to reach Kuina in heaven. And of course, Zoro's title is Pirate Hunter, a reference to his bounty hunting days in the East Blue. Yamato, our newest potential Straw Hat as of right now, is the child of Kaido, and was as such given the title of Oni Princess. Yamato's goal is to be free, similar to Luffy. However, this is in a much more literal sense, since they've always been trapped on Wano by Kaido. And now that Kaido's been defeated, it looks like they might have their chance to become free. Luffy's brother Ace also had conquerors. He originally wanted to become Pirate King himself, but decided to put all of his efforts into making Whitebeard the Pirate King. He was given the title Fire Fist in reference to his Devil Fruit, as well as his signature attack. Eustace Kid is also aiming to become King of the Pirates. However, he seems to be the most willing to do anything to reach that goal. While Luffy aims to become Pirate King, he tries to do things that are morally good while he does so. Kid, on the other hand, is willing to straight up execute anyone in his way. Kid's epithet is less than creative, but he is called Eustace Captain Kid. And our final canon Conqueror user is Boa Hancock, the Pirate Empress of Amazon Lily, the captain of the Kuja Pirates, and the former warlord. Hancock was a slave to the Celestial Dragons early on in her life, and has made it her goal to rise above everyone else so that she can never be looked down on again. Hancock's titles are both based on her position in Amazon Lily, being Snake Princess and Pirate Empress. And I've always kind of wondered how Big Mom felt about her being called Pirate Empress, considering that Big Mom was one of the 4 emperors, and that title likely would have made a lot more sense for her. But either way, let's move on to the final 2 members who are non-canon users. Firstly, Niguri. This is the old man that trained Luffy, Sabo, and Ace when they were young. He's a former pirate captain who battled Roger but was easily defeated. And we don't really know a lot about him, and I highly doubt we ever will, but when he left Grey Terminal, his dream of reuniting with his former crew was reignited. And finally, we have Douglas Bullet, the former member of Roger's crew, who was captured and kept in Impel Down for 20 years until Luffy's great escape. When he got out, Bullet set himself on becoming Pirate King, and to reach this goal, we would even see him taking on... This can't be right. The script says he took on everyone. One sec. Okay, having just watched Stampede for the first time, he did in fact take on everyone. Also, the movie was pretty cool, so check it out if you haven't. Regardless, for his general ruthlessness and desire to follow in his former captain's footsteps, Bullet was given the title of Demon Heir. And that's it. We have officially covered what Conquerors is, how it's used, who can use it, and why those characters are considered Conquerors. Honestly, this was a really fun video to work on because there's a lot of things I didn't really notice about Conquerors in the past. Like that the only non-pirate user is Sengoku, or that if they aren't captains, they only work in the crews of other Conquerors users. All really cool stuff in my opinion, but let me know what you think in the comments and if you knew those little details. You can also let me know if there's any other characters that you think might have Conquerors that we don't know about. As always though, if you've enjoyed this video, remember to leave a like and a comment down below letting us know what you thought. And of course, if you aren't subscribed, remember to hit that button to stay up to date with all of the great content we have in store for you. Finally, you can follow us over on Twitter at AnimeUproar, or you can follow my own channel, AxelBeats, if you're looking for more from me personally. With all that being said though, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, remember to stay excellent.